YouTube, welcome back to my channel. Grab yourself a drink. I got some ice water here because it is hot in Santiago. And let's chat about 2019 upcoming content, my explorations with ego work / self-esteem, self-confidence work, and what we can look forward to ahead in 2020. And I'm really excited about this. I hope that there's interest in this. I hope. A Q&A that I'm going to be hosting here in the coming weeks for my birthday. But before I get into that, just want to apologize right off the bat if you hear loud noises right now. They're not making noises, and I've closed the living room window. I've shut down my only source of fresh air and a cool breeze to keep the sound from the construction equipment from coming in. But one of the reasons why it's been a while and I'm behind in my videos is that I hear some noises now. Is that for the past 2 or 3 weeks, the building kind of next to ours in this direction has been undergoing major demolishing renovations. I don't even know what's going on, but like every construction equipment sound possible has been blasting from that building, plus the radio that they're listening to while they're working on the building. And so jackhammers, buzz saws, hammering, radio sounds. It's just been really loud for the past 2 or 3 weeks. And I have the most time to record my videos either during the week as like a study break, or if I record a video on the weekend, I usually only have time to record it on a Sunday, because Saturdays are like grocery shopping, visiting family kind of days. And so having the construction equipment sounds being so loud during the week has really cut out a lot of my free time or options for recording videos, so I apologize for that. And speaking of being behind in some videos, I know I still owe you guys the book reviews for these 2 books. The Pregnant Darkness review is forthcoming. I hope to have it ready next week. This time I mean it. And I still am only about a third of my way through Libernal and Psychonaut. This was the book I was supposed to read and review for October, but then in October, as many of you know if you follow me here and in Instagram, which is always linked in the description box below, my Instagram, the Student Witch Instagram, that is. Around mid-October, Chile as a country, nationwide, went through and is still going through a pretty serious political and social revolution, crisis, protest movement, whatever you want to call it. It's just been serious, especially during the first few weeks of the movement back in like mid to late October. And I've made videos about this. I'll have up here in the cards in the corner of this video, I'll have relevant videos pop up here related to what I'm talking about now. But yeah, that has caused me to get behind in my work and also get behind in the content I want to make. And also I have the classic, I don't want to call it a bad habit, but the classic conundrum, we'll call it, of having so many ideas but then not enough time to actually do it, right? So in my little journal here, where I just kind of take random notes about the videos I want to make, I have a whole list of so many cool witchy video ideas, but I just cannot find the time to make them, or at least not make them. I can't find the time to make them at the pace that I would like to. It's just the reality of dealing with life, dealing with political situations, and also trying to make progress on my dissertation and my grad student stuff, right? But some of the content that I would like to return to, or some of the topics I would like to kind of resurrect on my channel, include the tools of belief, which I made a candles and candle magic video recently, about a month or so ago, which I'll link up here. But I definitely want to talk about my tools of belief, the objects, the concepts that are important to my personal spiritual practice and my spiritual beliefs. I think it's really helped me to kind of work through my beliefs and figure out exactly why I believe what I do. And so I really enjoyed that series. Actually, I'll just have the whole playlist linked up here. There's only like 2 or 3 videos in the playlist so far, and that's why I kind of want to return to it, because it's an important playlist and it's an excuse for me to kind of share more of myself. I also want to return to my Witching Through Grad School series, because it has been quite a while since I've updated that series. And that has been for a few reasons. One, I moved to South America, and that was an intense year-long process between the planning. The first 6 months of 2019 was like planning and getting ready for the move. And then the last half of 2019 has been adapting and setting up a new life and starting from scratch and kind of getting back on the horse when it comes to my research and stuff. So like that kind of got in the way. But I do have some ideas, and I have had some ideas in my head rolling around like marbles, with all the other crazy marbles in my head, for video ideas for that playlist. But also on Instagram, I recently made a post about it, talking about how I feel like I'm finally ready to talk about how I have managed my anxiety and my imposter syndrome, procrastination, and perfectionism issues, which are all wrapped together, right, and interrelated. I'll be ready to make that video soon, and I have some tarot spreads that I've created specifically for dealing with imposter syndrome, procrastination, and perfectionism, which I will also share on this channel. I think that's probably coming in January. And what else? The Witching Through Grad School, the Tarot, the Tarot Favorite series. I've been thinking of, when I first started that series, I would kind of go through the major arcana and pick a specific representation of one of the cards that I favor amongst all of my decks. Like, for example, for the Magician, I believe I remember the Osho Zen Magician is one of my favorite representations of the Magician. And that works fine as long as I have access to all my decks, but I've had to leave probably about half of my tarot and oracle decks back in the US because I just didn't have the space in my luggage or the money to ship them here. So I'm thinking of kind of like tweaking that series a little bit and just talking about the cards in general. Like having a video dedicated just to the Nine of Swords, for example, which was my card for today, and what it means to me and how it has helped me through a specific situation in my life and all that kind of stuff. So I'm thinking of adding more regularly to that series. Yeah, I just feel ready to share more of myself. And now this kind of goes into my ego / self-esteem / self-confidence work that I have been focusing on, because I just think it's time. It's time. So before I get too deep into the ego work, before I lose people, let me talk about the Q&A. And I'll talk about this again at the end of the video in case you missed it. So yeah, I want to host a Q&A. I just reached and just went over the threshold of 1,000 subscribers back in between March, April, or May timeframe. And that was incredible. But then a few months later, Kellyanne Maddox did a shout out of some of her favorite smaller channels that she enjoys. And after that shout out, I gained another 300 or so subscribers, which is amazing. So I have a lot of these more recent subscribers, and I figured, what better way to welcome them to my little corner on the internet than to host a Q&A. And I've never done a Q&A before. So before I start talking about my journey with self-confidence and self-esteem and that kind of stuff, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's subscribed, especially the more recent subscribers. Those of you who have really, there's a few of you who have really kind of helped with the engagement on my channel and made comments and who've been really supportive. And so thank you so much. And so I want to share more of myself with you via a Q&A. And so the Q&A will be sometime around the solstice. So my birthday is December 21st. So I'm a Sagittarius, but I'm right on that cusp. And my birthday is a solstice this year. And so my partner and I just booked our hotel because we deserve a break. We deserve just a weekend getaway trip to the beach. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to Viña del Mar, which is a city that's like an hour and a half or so outside of Santiago on the coast. We found a fairly inexpensive hotel that's right on the beach, and I'm so excited. We're gonna be there just for 2 nights, that Friday, December 20th, and then Saturday, December 21st. So it's kind of like my weekend, my birthday weekend getaway trip, but it's also just a trip for us to relax, to go to the beach, to drink a bunch of beer and wine, and just kind of process the fact that by that point, by December 21st, we will have completed 6 months in Chile already, which is crazy. So around that time, I might even pack the camera and decide to record the Q&A from the hotel room and involve my partner. He's been in videos before, so he's cool with it. Just to chill, just to relax, just to share more of myself. And so if you have any specific questions for me that you would like me to answer for the Q&A, of course I reserve the right to not answer questions that I find are too, asking too much personal information. But if you have any questions about my life, about my spiritual practice, my approach to witchcraft, about experiences, anything and everything, I'll take a look at it. Comment below what you would like me to talk about for my witchy Q&A. I'll also make a post about this on my Instagram, and you can also comment on the Instagram post if you would prefer to do it there. And I'll make a publication on the community tab for my YouTube channel. So there'll be 3 different places where you can write down your questions for me, and then sometime around the solstice I will answer your questions. So we have a few weeks still to gather those questions, and then sometime around the solstice I'll post a video, and you can grab an adult beverage if you're of age, or a cup of tea or some iced cold water, and we can just chillax and get to know me. So why have I ended up focusing on ego work? And this is going to be I'm going to try to answer this question as succinctly as possible. And first of all, what is the ego? What is ego work? Really, the topic of what is the ego deserves its own hour-long video or series of videos. But really quickly, and if you've watched, I'll link it up here, my last couple of book reviews, I reviewed a book about the chakras, Eastern Body and Western Mind, and I reviewed a book about transpersonal psychology. And so I'm kind of going off of what those authors said about the ego. I'm not an expert, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychoanalyst. I just kind of pick little things up and run with them if they work for me. And so I understand the ego as being related to the solar plexus chakra. If you work with the chakra system or imagery in any way. I also relate the ego to the sun sign in astrology. Now, I am not an astrologer. I'm not a professional astrologer by any means whatsoever. I'm actually a very, very beginning student of astrology. I'm currently just starting chapter 2 of this workbook, Astrology for Yourself, a workbook for personal transformation, how to understand and interpret your own birth chart by Douglas Bloch and Demetra George. I think Arwen, on a video from 2 or 3 years ago, recommended this book for very beginning astrology students, and so I bought myself a copy, and then it sat collecting dust on my bookshelf for a couple years, so I decided to pack this with me and bring it to Chile with me, because now is the time to finally dip my toes into the vast ocean of astrology, and so I'm super excited. I'm just now beginning to kind of understand the birth chart, right? So for me, or from what I've seen in the Witchy Tarot YouTube pagan-y kind of community, a lot of people kind of summarize their birth chart into 3 signs. Your sun sign, your moon, and your rising. And I think that those 3 signs in particular kind of line up with the ego, the subconscious, and the persona. And so for me, the ego would be that sun sign. It is who you proclaim to be. It's who you shine and radiate out to the world to be, right? Based on who you think you are, right? Your sense of self, your egoic self, is who you think you are, who you want to be consciously, right? Whereas the moon, I would kind of relate to the subconscious part of the self, and the persona would be more of the rising sign, which would be your social relationships, who you are socially, the social responsibilities and duties that you take on, the social persona, who you are in relation to others, in relation to society, right? And I know probably people who are much more familiar with astrology right now are probably like, no, it's not just your sun, moon, and rising. It's also Mercury. It's also Jupiter. It's also where things were transiting and this and that. I understand. But again, I'm just a little baby, very beginning astrology student. And so this is just how I'm kind of working things out. And then once I figure if things don't fit together that way anymore, I'll update it. Don't worry. But yeah, so for me, the ego is the sun sign. It's the solar plexus. It is your conscious construction of yourself, and it's an incredibly important part of the self. If you watched my my book review video about the Inward Arc, which is a book about transpersonal psychology, she talks about, I believe, 5 senses of self, or 5 areas of self, or 5 parts of the self that we combine together to create a greater, wider, sense of self with a capital S, right? And that is your physical, your body self, your emotional self, your egoic self, your conscious or mental self, I believe, and then the transpersonal self, right? And the egoic self, it's an important part of yourself, but it's just one part, right? I feel like in the kind of alternative, spiritual, witchy, pagan-y kind of community, ego is often used as a synonym to like egocentric or narcissism or issues with the ego. But it is possible to have a healthy ego, and actually having a healthy ego and a healthy egoic sense of yourself is vitally important. The problem is, and the issues with ego and ego imbalances arises when we forget that we are not just who we think we are. And if you've studied anything about Buddhism, you know that the self itself is a construction, right? I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but it's important to have an individual sense of self, and to have self-confidence, and to have self-esteem, right? But also to be aware of your areas of growth, and be aware of your shortcomings, and do that shadow work as well, and to know thyself, right? Know thyself. And so I have decided in the past few months to really focus on my self-esteem, my self-confidence, my egoic sense of self. And I think this partially has to do with the fact that I've recently come out of my Saturn return. I'm going to turn 32 in a couple weeks in December. Well, we're already in December, but for the solstice, I'm turning 32. And so my late 20s weren't that long ago. And so I went through my Saturn return, and then after my Saturn return, I also experienced Jupiter passing through Sagittarius. Jupiter has been going through Sagittarius up until quite recently, and now Jupiter is entering into Capricorn. And so I'm a Sagittarius. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and then Jupiter's in Sagittarius from November 2018 to December 2nd, 2019, I believe. And in that year, I was really asked to confront my anxiety. I was really asked to expand beyond it and to grow. And so I moved to South America. I started my dissertation, and those two huge things are just two huge anxiety-riddled areas of my life, and I was asked to kind of welcome them and confront my anxieties as I started these huge projects, these huge tasks, right? And I'm actually in the middle of writing the second draft, a more polished version of my first chapter of my dissertation right now. And by God and Goddess, it will be done before my birthday. It will be done by December 20th. It will. It would just be the perfect cherry on top of a really intense year. And so to go through the trials and tribulations of my Saturn return, one of the biggest things I realized was it was high time for me to finally work on my anxiety. Because from my early 20s to like my late 20s, in that 7 or 8 year time frame, I really focused on my depression and where that comes from, and the generations of issues and mental health issues and abuse and stuff in my family, and where, like, the roots of a lot of it, where it comes from. Now that during my Saturn return, I really had to confront my anxiety and come to terms with it, and really try to understand just how pervasive it was, and just how it was like a weed growing into my garden, you know? It was just so pervasive and just leaked into so many different areas of my life, particularly my academic performance and my academic work part of my life. It was crippling. At one point, or a few points during my Saturn return, it was crippling. I also had to confront some previous traumatic events that I had gone through in my life. Traumatic events especially related to my body being violated by people. And so that was kind of the theme of my Saturn return, and now that I'm on the other side of it, I kind of caught the wave of Jupiter going through Sagittarius, that push to expand, to grow beyond, to have the audacity to tear down the walls and boundaries that we build around ourselves, that we convince ourselves are real in the sense that they're insurmountable, when really we're the ones who built those walls and boundaries and barriers around ourselves. We're the ones holding ourselves back. In some respects when it comes to issues like anxiety and perfectionism and imposter syndrome and stuff like that. There's a certain amount of that is within your control, so to speak, right? And now that Jupiter has moved into Capricorn, a very pragmatic, planning, goal-oriented, long-term planning kind of oriented planet, and Jupiter will be in Capricorn until December of next year, December of 2020, I'm going to try to kind of ride that wave and be productive. I'm going to try to have chapters 1, 2, and 4 written next year. And also do like the data collection and pre-writing or research for chapter 3. On top of going to a conference in May, on top of like all the other stuff I have to do. Because being a grad student at this stage, actually I'm a PhD candidate, right? So I'm ABD, all but dissertation. The only thing standing in the way between me and getting this goddamn degree is the dissertation. I'm going to try to tap into that Jupiter and Capricorn kind of energy to build discipline, routine, planning, consistent, long-term hard work, right? And so the only way for me to pull this off, to get the conference paper and conference presentation ready for a conference in Mexico that I'm going to next year, to get the fellowship applications done, to get the chapters written and approved, to get the interview and archival work done, to get all of this done, I need to finally believe in myself. And that includes trusting the work I've already put into the project, which is something I have trouble doing and remembering, and trusting my ability to deal with life as I try to get the work done. Because life is chaotic and you never know what might pop up, right? And so working with my ego and my self-confidence and believing in myself and working on my self-esteem and writing shit down and making lists, like making a list of all the things that I've been able to get done this year, despite moving to South America, despite Chile being in turmoil for the past almost 2 months, you know, despite all the roadblocks and the difficulties and trials and tribulations that life threw at me throughout 2019, I was still able to write the first draft of my first chapter, to go to a conference and successfully do all of that, the networking, paper writing workshop, blah, blah, blah. I was successfully able to move to South America and set up a home from scratch. I successfully was able to send in 6 fellowship applications, and now I'm about to write the second draft of my chapter. All of those things are a win, right? And yet, I still struggle to believe in my ability to do this, right? You know, so writing it down and seeing it outside of myself, physically on a piece of paper, really helps. But also the ego work. I did an ego candle spell a few months ago to kind of like spark this. I've incorporated astrology as a way to make meaning in my life and try to see the patterns, and working with the moon and working with my sun sign especially, and really just owning that Sagittarian energy to just kind of ride out the rest of this year and ride out the rest of this kind of transition process of getting used to life here in Chile, because 2020 is going to be busy, and the only way I'm going to survive this and get this dissertation done, or at least a significant portion of it done throughout 2020, is really if I believe in myself. Because sometimes when my anxiety flares up really bad, and my imposter syndrome and my perfectionism and this defensive-ness that I feel inside of me, it just gets in the way. It gets in the way, and it almost becomes self-sabotage. So this is another reason why I want to kind of resurrect the Witching Through Grad School series and talk specifically about that self-sabotage and anxiety and procrastination and all of that once I'm done writing the second draft of my first chapter, because I think by the time I get to that point, I'll finally kind of complete this circle. I'll complete this cycle, this journey with getting to know my anxiety that I've been on for the past year and a half or so. Right now, I want to clarify my journey with anxiety is probably going to be lifelong because those connections in my brain are there. There's a genetic component to this. There are several members of my family, including my immediate family, that also struggle with this. But also, just modern life is stressful. So when I say, you know, completing the cycle, completing the circle, I just completed the circle of owning it, of getting to know it and understanding where it comes from, the genetics of it, the traumatic experiences I had, some of the emotional, verbal abuse I got growing up from one of my parents that contributed to it, information from my birth chart for understanding why specifically it's my academic performance that is the source of most of my anxiety. My Saturn is in Sagittarius, for example, in my birth chart. I have 4 planets, or 4 heavenly bodies in Sagittarius in my birth chart. But it's kind of balanced out by 3 planets being in Capricorn, but still. Whew. I've been gathering all of this information about why this phenomenon is happening, the phenomenon being my anxiety, how long it's been with me, my entire life, where it comes from, why it's here, the lessons I have to learn from it, experimenting with different activities and different self-care activities that help me to manage it. But now it's really time to let it go. It's really time to move beyond it as much as I can. I'm just tired of it being as prevalent as it is. It's exhausting. Anxiety is utterly exhausting, especially when you're trying to write a dissertation and that voice in your head is constantly telling you that nothing is good enough, right? So, yeah, I guess to kind of wrap all of this up, now that we're past the 30-minute mark, please, if you're interested in participating in the Witchy Q&A, getting to know more about me and giving me an excuse to talk more about myself, please comment below or keep an eye on my Instagram because I'll make a post about that, or on the community tab here on YouTube for my channel. And yeah, how was the Jupiter transiting through, I don't know if I'm using the word transit here correctly, Jupiter going through Sagittarius, like basically the entire year of 2019 up until December 2nd. How was that for you? Were you experiencing anything in life that was pushing you beyond your boundaries and limits? Did you feel any of that expansion and growth? Like, did your family grow? Did you move to a new place? Did you make important changes in your life? Did you start a new career? Did you start a new area of study? Did you finally get that degree? Like, I'm really curious to see if anybody felt Jupiter going through Sagittarius as strongly as I did. Maybe it was just super strong for me because my sun sign is Sagittarius, so that might have had something to do with it. But yeah, write your comments, questions down below, and I'll get those book reviews up for you, or at least the Pregnant Darkness review up in the coming days. And then will be the Q&A after that. And then probably after the Witchy Q&A, that might be the last video that I make for 2019. So for December 2019, we'll have this video the book review, and then the Q&A, and then I'll take the rest of 2019 off just to enjoy the holidays down here in Chile with my Chilean family that I'm married into. And then we'll see each other again in January. So yeah, that's the content that's coming up. Thank you for listening to my rambles about ego work. Let me know what your thoughts are on ego work, and or how Jupiter transiting through Sagittarius was for you, and or if you have any questions for the Q&A. Comment below. Okay, bye!